All right, Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to Cleveland Heights Council Committee of the Whole. It is January 6th, 2025, 6 p.m. Addie, for the first time this year, please call.
Bosch.
Here.
Russell.
Here.
Maddox.
Here.
Larson.
Here.
Petrus.
Here.
Suda.
Here.
Cobb.
Here.
I'm backwards on your there.
Right, so that's good to mix things up. So legislative review is the next thing on the agenda. So I will start reeling it off from first readings for consideration for an adoption tonight. 001-2025, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with the County of Cuyahoga to perform certain services to help maintain cities' sanitary and storm sewers.
This one we do every year. Was the last.
And this has nothing to do with our fund.
No.
Okay. All right, any questions on this? All right, on to number 2, resolution reappointing Greg Kluge as an alternate member of the Board of Zoning Appeals. Any questions about that? All right, on to number 3, a resolution of reappointing a bunch of people to this the Citizens Advisory Committee. There are a couple of changes, I believe.
Yes,
Addie?
yeah, we're moving Jessica Shantz and Amanda Isaacson.
That's what I was asking.
Yep.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay,
There you go.
so that means Councilman Kopp, you have 2 openings.
We're removing Jessica Shantz and who else?
Amanda Isaacson. So we still are looking for one for the Caledonia neighborhood, now one for Fairfax neighborhood, and then another at large.
Okay, I need to write this down.
I have, I know some
For,
Caledonia,
okay, so we
cause
got
I noticed the other one.
Caledonia,
Could she be at large?
Fairfax,
And then at large, yes.
Could she
and
be
at
at large?
large. Really? Okay.
Is she on here? Would be at large?
No, because you got it done.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
All right, any other questions about the Citizens Advisory Committee? All right, Councilman Kopp, we have a administrative services?
We are gonna have one.
The usual
Yeah.
last Monday?
Yes.
Okay. So let's get the APB out and get those filled. Resolution number 4, a resolution reappointing Doreen Kelleher, Joaquin Martin, David Kraus, Kathleen, Benjit, Lonnie Paul, Alfredia Lacey as members of the Commission on Aging. Are we all filled up there with these reappointments? Okay. Any questions about this? All right, number 5, a resolution reappointing Cruz, Payne, Spaeth, Titus, Brown, Pesta, Hodges, Dew, and Talley as members of Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. Okay, these are all returns, I guess.
It should be
Number 6, resolution reappointing Margaret Land to the Landmark Commission. Number 7, a resolution confirming the appointment of Daniel Horrigan as city administrator. Crickets. So I guess this is a question for the mayor and Mr. Horrigan. So do we have a kind of definitive role that we could state that Mr. Horrigan would be playing as city administrator? And I asked that question because I remember asking this question when Danny Williams was appointed, and the answer was kind of like, it's a work in progress. I want to know if we've kind of settled on something this time where you could actually define it as, chief of staff, day-to-day operations manager, COO. I mean, I'm not saying it has to be those, but do we have something like that?
So I think historically, and you would remember the Issue 26 campaign talking about this particular position. And I think COO was often used as an example of a more well understood position that this might be compared to. I think that the charter makes it relatively clear what the role is intended to be, subject to the direction of the mayor, and in that particular administrative framework, this is somebody who is intended to help an elected mayor to provide that kind of organizational leadership and management that make sure that things get done the right way and according to the right timelines.
Is the org chart changing at all?
The org chart will likely change.
And what do you envision?
Oh, I'm not ready to reveal that yet. That's something that I would have to work with Mr. Horrigan on, thinking about his specific levels of experience in particular situations and subject matters, and sort that out together. And I think also in this case, it would probably be a good idea for us to, get some input from the directors and chiefs as well that we would be working with. In order to really create something that has the type of buy-in that we would want to have a smooth change management sort of situation.
Well, I appreciate if you don't want to go any farther with this answer, but I'm kind of hopeful for the stability of your finance department that we'll see someone who has the expertise in other governments that can bring some expertise to that department as it sort of fills out with your that's just a thought that I have. You don't need to react to it or not. But when I asked the question about the org chart, it was more specific regarding the finance department and how you envision that. It's obviously a purview how you handle it.
Thank you.
But that's what I would hope for.
Okay.
Do you see this differently than the other two city administrators? I mean, do you see like kind of an evolution of something more specific?
That's a good question. And I think that by necessity, you put a different person in a role and it changes. The nature of it changes. More than that, the initial city administrator, Mr. Sennett, was appointed by a mayor at that time. And since then, I've gotten a great deal more experienced at this role. And so the person appointing the city administrator has changed as well. So by necessity, I think that, of course, this is an evolution. In terms of being able to describe what that evolution exactly consists of, probably too complex to describe. And not something that I would even be able to sort of proactively or forecast, in terms of a description, but something that, again, Mr. Horrigan and I will have to work through. I don't know at this point, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of what it's like to work with Mr. Horrigan. That's not something that we've done yet. This is the first time he will work for the city of Cleveland Heights. And so that's something I think, the nature of that beast is that we will learn each other as we go. And I know that may or may not be a satisfactory answer for any particular council member, but it is the only possible answer unless I were to purely speculate. And I don't think I'm willing to do that.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I appreciate that. And I know in some of our conversations, it might be helpful. We've talked about that evolution in terms of staffing and leadership in those roles. And one of the things I've noticed, even the transition with the last two city administrators, is as things have shifted and you've taken on other things or started to expect some of that work, and you shifted those roles. And so I expect this to be similar to that in terms of building it out with the person that's there from a leadership standpoint. And so I think it'll be helpful as you guys have those conversations and we see that roll out. But that's obviously going to take time because he hasn't even been appointed yet. But the fact that you're even thinking about the evolution of that, to me, I think is important, especially looking down the road at some of the things that we know are coming, is that the two previous administrators are going to be touching some things that maybe this new city administrator hadn't experienced, or some changes or some adjustments that are happening even with us internally in terms of this council. So I think those adjustments on the fly are going to be helpful as well. So I think concretizing exactly what he would do with this early stage really doesn't make sense in terms of those conversations yet, just based on the fluidity of some of the things that you're doing. But I am glad that this is happening right at the start of the year, because it allows the two of you to kind of take a look at that and strategize on what that looks like, and then come back to council as we kind of see that develop. So I just appreciate that.
During his confirmation hearing, Mr. Horgan expressed a willingness to talk with individual council members. I had an opportunity to talk with him over the holidays. Really appreciate the opportunity to learn more about his experience and to share some of my priorities for the city with him. And so I just wanted to thank him and also reiterate my appreciation that he is interested in assisting the city of Cleveland Heights.
All right. So, move on. So then, let's see. Sorry, that was, yeah, okay, so 08, an ordinance to repeal and replace certain subparagraphs of the ordinance number 265, 2024 relating to appropriations and other expenditures of the city of Cleveland Heights.
Mr. President.
From January 1st to March 31st of this year, yes.
So my impression was that people wanted me to take the numbers for council from our drafted 2025 budget and include those. I was mistaken. I understood that incorrectly. And so whenever it became apparent to me that folks were actually asking for us to have 30% of our allocation included in the temporary budget, I reached out to the law department and requested that they draft up this legislation. So I went back to the exhibit, and the numbers are now 30% of the drafted budget for 2025.
Can I, who asked?
I'm sorry, who asked what?
Who asked for the reduction? You mentioned that people asked for the reduction.
Well, it was brought to my attention in the city's social media posts.
But which people, so you're saying the city?
The city's Facebook page had a post that brought attention to this,
Okay,
and I realized that I must have made a mistake, that people must have been asking for 30%, and I understood that incorrectly. And so it was at that point that I then reached out to the law department and asked that they draft new legislation.
okay, so it wasn't, just to be clear, it wasn't, when you say people, you assumed that people were asking for something as a result of that Facebook post. It wasn't people actually asking you to change it.
Well, there were insinuations there. That's how I interpreted it, so.
Anything else? Okay, first reading onlys. This is 9/25/2025, a resolution approving the mayor's appointment of Rodney G. Hairston as the Director of Finance. And I look around the room.
Well, I mean,
Please.
I did at least want to make an introduction. Mr. Hairston is here with us today. And he'll be observing the committee and council meetings this evening. And I imagine that this is as appropriate a time as any if there are any initial questions, maybe. I don't know if you're completely prepared to answer, but I imagine that there will be a confirmation hearing that we would set up with Clerk Ballister to sort out when a more formal conversation would be before bringing it back to the full council for consideration for approval.
Yeah, I mean, that was my first question, when can we do that? And do you wanna do something before the next council meeting, which is the 21st?
I would generally anticipate, and maybe this is, me making an assumption, and I can be, informed if my assumption is incorrect, but generally, I would anticipate that a first reading occurs, and then, barring some sort of disaster or something like that, you would have on the off week, a confirmation hearing and then bring it back for a second reading, assuming that council members are generally comfortable with bringing it back for consideration for approval.
Well, Eddie, let's do a dual poll and try to get that
I'll do a
happening.
mixed bag during the day and.
I have a question that, and certainly council members have at it. My question kind of maybe overlaps a little bit with the appointment of Dan Horrigan. Since HR is under finance, do we expect to have Mr. Hairston's part of his duties be that director of HR as well?
I would say no. So Cleveland Heights has been weird. I don't know if anybody knows this.
Oh, I know it.
We haven't had a Department of Human Resources. That's not something that we've ever had here, at least not in recent memory. So Human Resources was a function of the city manager's office. And so just for a bit of history, when I became, the head of the administration in 2022, what I walked into was a system where the, HR function was housed in what was then the mayor's office, what became the mayor's office, which at least from a spatial perspective, I found to be wholly inappropriate. I did not love the idea that employees who may be dealing with delicate subject matters or matters of concern for their sort of professional safety would have to come to the mayor's office in order to speak with human resources. Our director of HR was not the director of a department because that department did not exist.
So just to be clear, Anna Smith was not the director of HR.
She was not the director of a department. Her title was director of HR.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If I could just, for just a second, 'cause I know there's some confused looks. I do know that a couple of years ago, HR came and did a presentation to us during the budgets that was inside of the other department to show how they operate. So we've gotten books from them, but that was all fed out of another department. It was never a standalone. So if some of you are recalling meeting with her and having those conversations, it was always housed in that. It's just that presentation was broken out for how that department worked, so you could see how they move within that department, but it's always been up under another department. So I know there's some confusion about that, maybe because they did a standalone separate presentation. I think that was like 2 years ago or so, and along with the other department presentation. So that might be why there's some confusion there.
Well, may yeah, it is a little confusing because I looked to Mr. Cobb because I know when I came on council in 19, there was maybe housed in the area of the mayor's, I wouldn't even say the mayor's office when you first go in. I'm not sure what office that is.
It was a
has
city
a lot
manager.
of, huh?
City manager
at that time.
Well, city manager, but there was a HR director and she had staff up under her that when we became council, we had to fill out paperwork and all that information, and that went through her and her other,
Yeah, she
her
was
staff
reporting
members.
in through though. She wasn't the director. She was still reporting in through another director when she did that. It wasn't.
No, this was 19, this was before you were on council, so I'm saying.
But it's been the same way since I've worked for the city the whole time. It's never.
So we've never had a department.
Yeah, since I was
of human
13,
resources.
we've never had.
Just to clarify and reiterate, we've never had a Department of Human Resources. And
So people just said it was a Department of Human Resources?
so just to be clear, we have never had a Department of Human Resources. We had a particular position that was called Director of Human Resources, but that director was not the director of a department. That director was housed in the city manager's office until the change of government, at which point, just by virtue of inertia, that function, that office of HR, was housed in the mayor's office. At that point, I determined that I would, especially, given the particular skill set and experience of the former director of finance, place human resources as a function of the Department of Finance. And it was intended to maximize on the coordination between the payroll functions of the finance department and the employee-facing functions related to payroll in the HR office. Now, I will say that with the impending, hopefully, appointment of Mr. Horgan and the impending, hopefully, appointment of Mr. Hairston, that is something that I am interested in. I've already had a conversation with both gentlemen about taking a look at that setup and seeing if it works best in our context. So this might be something that is going to change as well, just as a heads up.
So, I mean, the reason I'm asking this is, and then I'll get this. So when we're voting, like, to confirm Mr. Horgan or Mr. Hairston, if we don't know what they do, that does make it a little harder. That's kind of number one. Number two, there's 430 odd employees, something like that.
Depends on the time of year.
All right. So recruiting, retaining, and training talent seems to be a big job when you got like that many people working for you. And then the last piece, somebody who understands benefits. This is what people in human resources do in the world that I've lived in, which is the school, the school district model.
I can short circuit your question a little bit, or
Well, I don't know if I don't even know if I have a question.
well, let me explain something, and I might be.
Let me finish what I'm gonna say because I'm real close.
Okay.
So those four functions, I mean, that's a skill set that I'm very familiar with. And if I don't know who's doing it, then I'm not sure what I'm doing when I'm, if it's gonna be Mr. Horgan, and I'm not suggesting it should be or anything, that's one thing. You did at one point say, I'm putting the HR function under finance. I mean, it was 2.5 years ago or whatever it was. So if that's not gonna be the case, that's helpful, because when I look at Mr. Harrison's resume, if I don't have to look for that particular skill set, which is unique, it's not necessarily something somebody would do in finance. It could be, but not necessarily. But you're saying it's gonna be where now?
Let me clarify for you.
Okay,
So at no point was the director of finance intended to be the HR lead for the city. So I want to make that very clear. The assistant director of human resources within the Department of Finance is the HR lead currently of the city. So the director of finance is not the HR lead.
so who does the assistant director report to?
So the assistant director currently reports to the finance director.
Got it.
So in the same way that you wouldn't necessarily anticipate that, for instance, Director Zanft, is the lead on our CDBG work. We've got an assistant director of community development that, has a history and experience in that work, specifically here in Cleveland Heights and elsewhere. Now, Director Zanft does manage the assistant directors within his department, but he doesn't perform the duties
Right.
of those assistant directors. And it's a similar situation under the current system in finance with almost a division of HR within the Department of Finance. The finance director does not perform the HR duties that the assistant director of finance for HR performs. So you don't have to look for those skill sets
that.
in order to supplement the HR function. But I will say this, again, I've already had broached the conversation with these two gentlemen about finding a system that works best for Cleveland Heights. And I'm open to evolving as we move forward because I'm always interested in continuous improvement. And this is one of those situations that I think we can find some.
Who put their hand up first? I'm sorry. Chip?
I'm gonna hold.
Okay.
Just to piggyback off of that, so my background, organizational leadership development, training, and HR. So the way to look at this, I think, in his role from an executive level leadership would be your chief operating
Now,
officer.
who's his role? 'Cause I-
So the city administrators would be the chief operating officer. So anyone reporting up to that chief operating officer would be a director level leader. You would expect them to be the specialists within those divisions. But yet the competency of that COO would not be at the same level as those specialists and those leaders. And so although they're overseeing that work, the expectation should never be that that person is the specialization for those. For instance, as chief executive officer of my own organization, I've got a finance person, I've got my HR people, and then even at the church, I've got a minister of music, but no one's expecting me to understand what they understand at that level. And so when we're interviewing candidates, this is for the public as well, because I know there's been some emails about resumes and things. It's important to understand that breakdown and that structure so that you don't have expectations for the executive level leader that you may have for the director of that department that's supporting that work, because their goal is to understand enough to be able to oversee that in high level and how it connects with the other departments, but not to get in to do that work themselves. And so I just want to make sure that we're separating out those two expectations as we're doing any interviews or conversations. They should know enough to be competent and understand how everything is falling on the field, but not necessarily know what's happening in terms of being a specialist in each of those divisions under that. And I think for the city administrator, it's important because they're not just touching HR possibly, it's every department in the city. And so I think we're looking for a set of competencies instead of specializations, I think is a good way to put that.
All right. Any other? Okay. Then I'm going to move on to number 10, an ordinance introducing amendments to various sections of Part 11 zoning code of the codified ordinances of the city of Cleveland Heights. So that I'm referring to the planning commission. But does anybody want to? Certainly, if you have questions about it. So I'm planning on commission and committee and then eventually bounce back to us. And finally, number 11, an ordinance making appropriations for the current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Cleveland Heights for the period of January 21st through December 31st, repealing and replacing ordinance number 265. I'm going to refer this to finance, but if anybody wants to chime in on something here, by all means, go ahead.
I just want to say, I think that the previous meeting we had, not the council meeting, but the one that shifted into the work session, I think was helpful in terms of information for a lot of residents, for myself in terms of how that information was presented. And I just came away with a couple of suggestions that I'm hoping this council can use to move forward and collaborate on that years-long budget. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation in finance. But I did take quite a few notes from that day in terms of, but one thing I will say here is I'm hoping that we can find a way to separate out those very specific questions that don't touch the budget and things that are still important for council to want to know from everything else. And so I think it's clear for everyone at the table to work through those, as well as the public, what we're looking for. Just based on the presentation in that meeting, I think there's still maybe some confusion or misunderstanding about what is actually attached to that budget and necessary to answer for that versus some other things. And so I think anything that the council can do to separate those two out, I think will be extremely helpful at the beginning of the year, because this is one of the big focuses that I have, is to really move on past this budget, get this full year's budget passed so that we can move with the city, because there's so many things happening. And any time that we spend on this temporary budget and that 12-year budget is going to take away from that. So any momentum that we can pull back from this and find a way to collaborate on, I'm definitely interested in. But I think as a starting point, just making sure that any outstanding questions that council is saying that they don't have are actually connected and tied to that budget, I think will be helpful. And the other suggestion I have is again, going back to that process, working with the administration in terms of some of our capital improvement projects that I know they presented, and they wanted to have that conversation in a more collaborative way. And I still think that that is the most positive way to move forward. I know it was different for some members of the council in the past to do, but I think looking at that 1 year plan, a 5-year plan, or a 10 or 15-year plan, I think is still going to be more helpful in the long run, long after we're gone at least. And so I think segmenting out the conversations that we need to have about our capital improvement conversations and being clear about what questions the council has that aren't directly tied to that budget, I think will be helpful. And so I'm hoping we could find a way to kind of work through that in terms of the finance committee. But I'm hoping this is something we can resolve quite quickly so that we can kind of move forward on to some other larger projects.
Councilman Petrus?
I'm hopeful. We typically have 2 meetings a month. In December, we had 6 meetings to get to the point where we had a temporary budget. And so I suspect that in discussing a longer budget for the year, it'll probably take some additional time. And so I'm hopeful that there's a willingness among council members to schedule a couple additional meetings. Also, Mr. Mayor, will it be possible for us to receive like a written overview of the changes that you made between the original drafted budget and the one that you more recently introduced? During the meeting, you talked through the hospitalization expense, but is it possible to get something in writing about like the other changes that were made?
I don't see why not. That will likely maybe be the last thing I want to do, though. Is there any, because that is sort of ancillary if you are only looking at it relative to the budget that was proposed in November. If you're looking at it as a standalone, then it may not have the same you may not have the same needs. I'm gonna work on that after I'm done putting together the package for all of you, and so I'll hope to get to that. And I imagine that if I don't get it in writing, then what I may have to do, because that can be a cumbersome process in and of itself, is work through each of the changes with you directly, and so you can be informed about each of those changes. Whether it's in a council meeting or a committee meeting or in our meeting.
Yeah, if I could, I mean, my preference would be with everyone so that they can hear. If you would prefer to do it conversationally as opposed to in writing, that's fine with me, so long as we can understand that.
It may also be something that I do sort of in a video format that all of you can watch repeatedly at your leisure, as I'm sure you love to do.
2 clarification questions. So you said package. What is that a reference to? I'm sorry.
Well, it would be the package of materials that council would expect to receive, the financial information. For instance, all of the spreadsheets that you received for the 2024 fiscal year budget, going through and making sure that you've got access to those spreadsheets and can take a look at that detailed information about this budget proposal, I think is an important thing, and I'm working on that right now, and so I'll be getting that to you as soon as I can.
So in my other, well, I guess that's more a point. Going through the exhibit, I see that there are numbers that are highlighted, and obviously in comparing that to the old exhibit, I can say, okay, there's this increase, there's this decrease, but knowing the context, the reason for that change, that was the reason for my question, to better understand. And you explained during your meeting in
We can get into
December
the specifics
about
of
the
each
hospitalization.
change. Yeah.
Yes, just knowing what it is that we're changing will be helpful.
All right, Councilman Larson.
Although technically you're not changing anything. That was voted down and is disposed of. This is a wholly new piece of legislation.
Right.
One of the concepts I'm struggling with, Mayor, is that the budget that's included with this legislation, for instance, is a breakdown just of the expenditures. And it's not in the department's data. In order to get like the fire department, you have to consolidate 7101, 7102, 7103 to get a total for that department. And I think that's one of the reasons I like the budget book approach, because we don't have to do, like, I'm starting to build spreadsheets right now myself to see how it compares to the 24 budget and the 22 and 23 actuals. So That's what I'm struggling with.
Yeah, no, certainly. So, and this is one of the things that I addressed a little bit in the December 30th meeting. And I understand that it caused a bit of confusion, I think, as well, the separation between the appropriations ordinance and a budget conversation and process and presentation, a set of presentations, because ultimately the budget book, as we call it, is really just a set of presentations. In the same way that in 2024, when we provided each of those departmental presentations, we were providing virtually the same information that we did in the budget book that we presented in 2023. It was just in a different format. So if you took all those presentations and you put them, in a folder, in a binder with that initial budget overview that we provided, it would basically be the same set of information that we provided the year prior. However, what I noticed, and this is not something that I anticipated, but what I noticed from the questions from some council members, is that there was a bit of confusion between the numbers that were specific to a department in those departmental presentations where the purpose was to give you an idea about the specifics of that department, and the appropriations ordinance. So an appropriations ordinance is not a budget. It's based on a budget. The budget is the estimate of revenues and expenditures, right? The appropriations ordinance is not a budget. It is an allowance from the budgetary authority for the administration to spend public dollars during the ensuing fiscal year. So that's what the appropriations ordinance is. And obviously, as I mentioned in the presentation, an appropriation is a requirement for any administration in Ohio to actually do its work, because all of the work takes money. And we cannot legally expend public dollars except as allowed by an appropriation by the council. So the appropriations ordinance is technically the thing that is required in order for the administration to expend the dollars. The budget, or the estimate of revenues and expenditures, is what we provided subsequent to that appropriations ordinance being provided to council, and something that I discussed in that presentation on the 30th of December as well. However, that was an overview, and I will be getting you more information. And I know that you'd like to see the departmental breakdowns, the specific departmental
Comparisons to
breakdowns.
previous year.
But I want to caution the council this time, so I'm going to be proactive. Do not conflate those departmental presentations with the actual appropriation. We do fund budgeting. So specific functions are sometimes funded out of multiple funds, of the government. And, that has a responsibility to sometimes the source of the funds, and sometimes required uses of the funds. And so the fund budgeting aspect of this, I think, probably throws people for a loop a little bit, especially if they are looking to those incomplete departmental presentations to get a complete picture of the appropriations ordinance.
So, I think one of the things, well, first of all, I want to go on record, and just to agree with what you mentioned, Mr. Petrus, about moving forward as quickly as possible to get a full budget passed. And I think there's other people around this table, and I believe you, Anthony, mentioned the same a few moments ago. How can we do this quickly and get?
We can't hear you on this end. I'm sorry, it's just noise.
I think we need to manage some expectations amongst ourselves, what we have for ourselves and what we have for staff at this point. I have a very strong expectation that we have a budget book that we can look at, that the public can look at, that rolls data into departmental categories it takes everything that's maybe not in a departmental, like hospitalization, just so we can look at everything and in summary form, and not necessarily from the appropriations piece that we see starting on page, I believe, 135 of our main meeting notes starts on.
Yes.
I already scrolled down, but it's what we'd normally approve with the appropriations. It's really important, I think, for us to compare the budget book from last year and the changes in the budget book from this year, just so we see where we are. I respect the fact that you've made some key changes. I respect the fact that it brings our spending down. I think that's gonna be helpful. But I have a strong expectation that this all gets presented to us in a budget book form, and then it goes into what you would put into your accounting system. And yeah, I do wanna see everything add up in total and be nice and pretty for us and for our community members. I also have a strong feeling about the capital budget. I think we need to have a capital budget from day one. You know, trying to figure it out as the year goes by. I just don't think it's an appropriate use. I mean, I think we've heard that your pending COO refers to a budget as a roadmap for the city, and I truly believe that. I'm excited to hear that that's what we would look at for a roadmap that we all can follow. It gives us guardrails and it sets expectations for not only us, but everybody that works here in the city and our community on what we're gonna get accomplished. And I think that needs to be reflected in the budget book. And I would like, my expectation is all the capital items are gonna be in the budget book like we've done in the past. Now, I think the issue here is there's 7 of us that are making a decision on this budget and how it's gonna proceed and what do we need in order to get it passed. I mean, how can we figure out, I think maybe we all have different expectations, but how can we get on the same page?
Yeah, I mean, I've listed several things that I'd like to see before I vote on a budget again. And I can reiterate them. You know, I certainly wanna know what a real number is for the unencumbered balance for 2024, not an estimate. We talked on December 30th, although it was a tangential conversation about that we would get the October, November financials, which we've always had before we've voted on a budget. And Mr. Phelps said he would be able to get those to us maybe even this week. Definitely wanna see the 2023 financial audit, state financial audit. I'm anxious for the CPA firm that's gonna review the 2024 budget to finish their work this month. The Archer salary study, which you've seen, we haven't, like to see it. Any estimates from any other probable salary increases and the capital budget, real numbers, as much as we can. Maybe that's something that could be presented, if you got anything more, at a finance committee meeting. That would be helpful.
How quickly can we have a finance committee?
Well, there's one on the 14th, right? Or am I wrong? The date?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a week from tomorrow.
Can we do it any sooner?
I mean, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question because
Can we do it any sooner?
depends on the availability of the committee members.
I'm open.
Open. I think, if I can speculate, I presume that we're gonna have other council members that are gonna wanna be at that meeting.
It's filmed.
Is that correct?
Yes. We can always, we always are free to show up. Are you trying to say we should make
I
a
think
committee
if
of
there's,
all?
I'm not saying that, I think
Okay.
it should go through the finance committee, call whatever you want to, but I
Right.
mean, in my world, I would think it should be in the finance committee, but I think if there's a doodle poll going out, you may want to include all the council
Oh.
members. That's what I was gonna.
Do you
I think
do you
you
do that
did.
for every committee? Yeah, okay.
Unless specifically requested to just do the committee.
Alright.
So we'll have to see if
That loophole
what
did
critical mass exactly of council members is available for any particular, is this a unanimous kind of situation where everybody has to be present, or is that how council is doing this?
I mean,
I'm asking.
60 seconds ago, I was like fine with the finance committee. And I knew from Councilwoman Larson that they were meeting on the 14th. So now that this is on.
As an alternative proposal, having a finance committee does not preclude having additional conversation with more people if they cannot show up to a finance committee. It doesn't preclude another meeting to provide this information. Or any offline questions that may result from that meeting as well.
Councilwoman Larson, was there, I know you have a few,
President Kuda,
yes.
will you call me counselor, please?
Oh, Counselor, sorry.
Thank you.
What did I say?
Councilman.
Oh, I didn't even realize this. Counselor Larson, is there anybody else you've invited for the 14th that you would have to move around? Because I know you have,
No, I was waiting for the mayor's response to see
Got
if they
it.
could have
Okay.
administration.
All
No, that's the only invitation
all right,
that I sent out.
I'll try to make myself available.
I was gonna call Counselor Larson about inviting the accounting firm that we would like to hire to that meeting,
Sure.
because I think that would be appropriate.
Are they available, do you think?
I don't know. There's still work trying to get that contract resolved. I think there's some,
The agreement's not signed yet?
the agreement is not signed, but I think they've moved forward today with some.
Can you tell us where we're at on that?
I think it's essentially final, yeah,
Okay,
as of this afternoon, late this afternoon.
so any moment now?
Would you wanna keep the 14th and do something earlier? Or
I'm
Yes.
gonna keep the 14th, and then if others want to meet at a different time, then
awesome, yeah.
All right,
what you're gonna do, yeah. Dean?
I have a couple of quick questions when you're done.
So if we are going to be meeting as a council or a finance committee specific to the budget, I would like to see an agenda that this council puts together, because I have questions. I know pretty much every of us around the table have specific questions that we want to air, and we want to make sure that they're appropriate. And I think, for example, I used the idea of the budget book earlier, okay? Is a budget book is one of our requirements in order to move forward? Because if it's not, it may simplify the work that the mayor has to do. But some of us may not feel comfortable enough voting on the budget without it. So I think we need to set some expectations for ourselves. And maybe that's the first thing that has to happen. These are the questions. Is it an appropriate question? Is it not an appropriate question? Do we need this answered? The Archer survey, for example, okay? There's a lot of mixed feelings on this table right now, just looking at some emails going back and forth with the mayor's office about is that necessary or not? Someone has to make that choice, and we gotta discuss that.
Yeah, I know there's 6 or 7 things that I want to see before I vote on another budget, but I realize we're 7 people. And I do think we need to separate out the stuff that is more philosophical or future oriented, that doesn't need, it's not something we need to know to vote on a budget. So we can separate those things out, and that could happen at the finance. I think that should be part of what happens at the finance committee.
That's precisely what I was suggesting, is separating out what we're asking for that's just informational versus what we need for that budget. And the reason I'm saying that, it's not even clear to some of our residents exactly what list we're working off of. As I'm looking through some of the emails that are coming from the administration and the council, it seems like they're working out of multiple council members' inboxes to answer these questions, but there isn't a clear roadmap. I think before we meet and do anything else with the administration, I think it should be at least clear to the people at the table what's necessary to approve this budget. We've got to be able to say this is the information that is being required from the majority of this council, and this is just informational. And I think the public is conflating the two, and sometimes we are at the table, and I think in a sense is that maybe some of us feel like it is important, some of us don't, but I think we've got to iron that out at this point, where it's going to make it very difficult to move past this, to do this budget. So I think the number one thing is this council has to come together and decide and have a serious agreement about what is necessary, what information is necessary, absolutely, from the administration. And I don't think we're at that point yet, where we have that's kind of clear with everyone. So I don't know how we arrive at that, but I know this is going to stay at a standstill until we can separate those two out. And in terms of the other part of that budget, those capital improvement projects, I'm completely open to working with the administration. If we can't have a regular meeting on that, doing a work session and work through some of these things so we can talk about them and get them in there. Because for me, I think it's important that we don't just include any totals in there without having that broader conversation. Since they brought some of those emergent needs and then some of those things that they were looking out a couple of years out. I think we really should take a look at that separately, and I'm more than open to do that. But I think that we need to have a separate meeting just for those capital improvements if we want to work through that, whether it's a work session or a finance committee meeting. But I think the council itself, I don't think at this point we can even answer to the public one list of requests that we need from everyone to get this passed. And I think that that's going to make it very difficult for the administration and the finance department to move forward without that, because these emails are coming through constantly from different council members and their checklists and their own spreadsheets. I think we've got to solidify this into something coming from the majority of members of council who are still requiring this information.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Just in response to that, although I know that the capital conversation that I intended to have was conceived in a particular spirit, I heard the message loud and clear, that was not the appropriate approach to take. And so, and I'm hearing it again here, and so I will revise that approach, and you will receive then my decision about what capital we are pursuing this year and what we are not.
And just to kind of piggyback on that, I mean, I asked all the council members like 10 months ago, I think, send the mayor your request for the budget. So I didn't limit it to capital, or personnel or any particular thing. So I'm assuming, that, and I appreciate the idea of having a collaborative conversation, and we will have that conversation, even if it mostly or totally comes from the administration. But I do think we need that starting point. So thank you for that. Go ahead.
I just want to reiterate, if that's the route we're going to go, I want to make sure that conversation is still smooth, because remember, we're removing ourselves from that conversation. And so some of the questions that this council particularly likes to ask about specifics, I just want to make sure that we're not running the administration in circles after we've asked them to present us with this, because there's a level of uncertainty. I just want to make sure that if they provide this information, that we're going to operate in good faith when they do so and not send them back to the drawing board. Because I'd rather do it collaboratively. But if we're stating as a majority council, we do not want that. I don't want us to change our minds or start poking holes or asking questions later on in that process, because it's going to send us backwards. And so I just want to make sure as a council, are we sure we want to take this approach? And the reason I'm stating that is, one thing is going to connect to the other. If I pull a root over here, it's going to affect something over here. And I just want to make sure that since some of us are going to be on this council, no matter what happens this year after, that they have some type of roadmap for the city and that it's clear about that investment. And I just really do not think it's a good idea to not have any type of collaborative conversation about that. And so I'm hoping that if they present this information, that we'll be open to it, since we're choosing this route. Because I think from a strategic planning standpoint, I think it's really, really important that council look beyond just what was happening in 2025 in terms of the city, its savings, and some of these repairs in these facilities. And so although I know for expediency or because of the way we've done things in the past, we don't want it that way. But in this particular way, we're talking about the vision and strategy for the city. And so I would like to know, if they present this information, what is our plan in moving forward to have that conversation, whether it's just for the 2025 period or for 5 or 10 years out, to make sure the council is still driving that conversation, since we're responsible for approving that budget. I want to make sure that we're clear about what we're investing in. And I think we're leaving ourselves out of that process if we do so. And so I would like to have some type of avenue to still have that conversation after it's presented, to make sure that we're at least clear about what's happening beyond 2025 from a strategic standpoint.
I mean, I think we've done this before, 23 and 24, where we've, been presented a capital budget and we've maybe massaged it a little bit on our end, but, most of it came from the administration, seemed to work out fine. Yes,
Mr. President, I just wanted to encourage council, I think there's been some discussion tonight that sounds like a consensus or some movement toward a consensus that council feels that it should determine those things that it wants to ask of the mayor, the administration before approving a budget. I would suggest that those discussions take place in a committee of the whole meeting or a council meeting. Committee of the whole would make more sense. And whether that's a finance committee / committee of the whole meeting or something different, I just want to make sure that discussion and that decision-making isn't occurring outside of that kind of a process, sitting around the table.
Oh, definitely. So we can, I'd be willing to come, we don't have enough time to do that before this meeting, but would you like to reconvene after the regular meeting and get this settled as to what we want on the agenda for,
I don't think no one's prepared to do that.
well, I mean, I have a list. I have a list of things that I want to see before we do a long-term 2025 budget.
So, I mean, I do have a list. I know you have a list. I mean, maybe some of my peers do or don't. Maybe that's a starting point. If we're certainly not prepared, we shouldn't be making any decisions tonight, okay? Obviously for that, but if you want to meet after this, I'm all for that. Or if you want to take a documented list, we send it to Addie. Addie builds it out, shares it all with us, and then we meet. Maybe that's a little bit better use of time.
But
I think it's up to you and how you want to deal
what
with it.
you're saying is that we need to make a decision in this room when we do it.
I think that it is possible in a way that's, consistent with the Open Meetings Act to work with the clerk to collect information and then distribute it out to council members individually so that there's no opportunities for crosstalk or deliberation.
So
And then come back into a meeting and finish it there.
I'm fine with meeting after this meeting. I'm fine with us sending this is what we need to do a 2025 comprehensive budget to Addie and then having that go to the finance committee.
I have a question, just so I'm clear. So if Councilor Larson have a finance committee meeting and all members of council can be there on the 14th, couldn't she create an agenda that states the first item would be everyone come prepared to bring their questions and that have been answered or have not been answered, to create a list for Addie to give to the mayor so that the list is there?
Yeah, I think the idea was to expedite things, to have that done first and then so the meeting would start with, with that information already in place.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see.
If I might, I'm sorry.
No.
Just following up on that, I'm not sure who the vice president meant by everyone, but this could be, it still sounds to me like it may be a committee of the whole discussion. And one way to meld those things could be to have a committee of the whole meeting where the president allows the finance committee chair to run the meeting as chair of the meeting, because the topic is going to be the budget and finance issues.
Yeah.
But that way everybody can weigh in and deliberate and discuss and so forth.
Well, what we could do, I guess, is have a committee of the whole meeting right in front of this possibly scheduled finance committee meeting. And then just, I don't know, but go ahead.
So I know we're talking about the collaboration in terms of the conversation about that compiled list. I guess my question and concern is, are we waiting to see that list in its final version on the 14th? And then are we giving that list to the administration because it keeps pushing everything out? I'd rather them have something this week that's concrete. going into next week have that information in one versus
I'm fine with
getting
that.
it after the 14th
I'm fine with that.
and
So-
moving out.
I said, we can come back here right after this meeting. I don't think it's gonna be that long, to be honest with you.
I agree with it seems like there's a general sentiment that we need to form a consensus around what our requirements are for a budget.
Yeah.
While we could certainly compile our own lists and send them to Addie and she could send them out in advance to people, I think that it would be helpful if we had an opportunity to talk with one another. So after we have the list, okay, I see this is what Councilman Posh wants, this is what Councilman Maddox wants, rather than just doing that electronically. Because maybe it's the case that we realize that there's something, in talking with one another, something that I thought would be important, actually, I no longer need. So I think that it would be helpful for that to be the first thing, whether that finance committee meeting is next week or this week. I think that it would be appropriate to do it in person.
Can we come back here for like 20 minutes, half hour and hash this out after the regular meeting? Everybody okay with that?
I won't be here, but
You can't do it?
Nope.
And you can't do it.
That's why
So
I
would
said
you rather
send
do it,
emails.
what would you rather?
I don't have any questions though, so that's why I said I knew I wouldn't be the holdup. So
Oh,
so
got it.
I don't have a problem with the conversation happening without me. Yeah, because I don't have any outstanding
Okay.
questions.
Does everybody else wanna do that?
I'm available.
I'm available. I don't wanna make anyone feel like they're excluded
no.
if they.
No, that's
No,
fine.
no.
Councilman Max saying he doesn't need to be here.
I can send my questions to Addie.
That'd be great.
Alright, so we'll do that. Yes.
Because this was just unexpected.
Yes.
Clarification, what you just said is coming in after our meeting tonight, and what Vice President Russell is saying is sending information to Addie.
Just her,
She will.
just her,
Okay,
not everybody else, just her.
I have a long list, so I'm looking at, that's gonna take more than 20 minutes.
Well, let's try to narrow things, I mean, the purpose is to narrow it down to.
We're just talking about
the section.
capital.
Well, no, it's not just capital, but it's just, what do we need before we can pass?
And I apologize because looking at the agenda, I didn't see that, so I
Fair enough,
I
no,
left
we,
all of that at the house.
sometimes you gotta, do things on stuff comes up,
Yeah, that's fine.
Mr. President, I know that it's not on the agenda this evening, but would it be possible for us to talk for 2 minutes about the rights and responsibilities legislation?
Yeah, just let me get through a few
Or is there
other
another
things.
place where?
Yeah, you wanna do it in old business out
Well,
there?
I think that it would probably be better at this table.
Oh, right, because we're gonna vote tonight?
No, it's not on the agenda.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So, I shared previously, as some people know, a few residents reached out with some concerns. I sat down with the law department before the holidays. We made some changes that will streamline the distribution of it. I think that will take care of the vast majority of concerns.
Electronic, in person.
Exactly, of the vast majority of concerns that have been raised. There were also some concerns about the penalty. It was drafted to be a first-degree misdemeanor, which is consistent with other parts of the housing code. But that's something that has drawn some attention, and so I asked the law department if they would be able to share some other options with us. And so I feel like it would be good for us to discuss those so that we can see if there's a general consensus, and then the law department can proceed with making those changes. So, Mr. Law Director, would you be able to share some of those different options with folks so that we could maybe identify whether there's an alternative that would work better for folks?
Sure, so,
And would you like me, I printed out the email that you sent me. Do you want me
okay,
to?
I've got it,
Do you want me to share it with others?
No, not right now.
Okay.
But I think the question really was whether penalties that are consistent with a first-degree misdemeanor are appropriate for a violation of this new ordinance. And some folks suggested that it might be sort of much too onerous, considering the nature of the regulation. And so, long and short of it is that council has the discretion to treat this in a way that it sees fit, and council could also, since this is brand new, come back to it and change it in a year or X number of years if the intended effects aren't being seen, right? So generally for a first degree misdemeanor, you're looking at potential imprisonment of 6 months and a fine of not more than $1,000, and that's something that can be assessed for each day of violation, so that's very substantial. second degree misdemeanor is $750. Third degree is $500. Fourth is $250, and a minor misdemeanor is $150. But again, theoretically, that could be a fine that would attach to each day of a violation. So none of them is insignificant potentially, depending upon how quickly some party who is charged with violating the regulation would respond and cure that violation. But I think that's really for council's decision making, and that's again sort of the gamut of misdemeanor.
Okay, so,
It's not
yes,
stated as per unit though, right? Like we're talking a large apartment building, for instance.
Yeah, it's not stated currently as per unit. What I was referring to is just per day,
Okay.
not per unit.
so initially, the law department drafted it so that it would be consistent with other parts of the housing code. Again, that's not more than $1,000 or 6 months in jail. And so the law director read a few other options. Is there anything that appealed to folks? Mr. Mayor, this is open for your feedback as well.
I'm pretty focused. So I will have to weigh in a bit later.
Okay. Councilman Cobb, I know that this was something that you, I'm sorry, I asked you just as you put something in your mouth. I apologize.
I think the goal of this legislation is we want to have the landlords get into compliance rather than be punitive.
Yes.
And I would suggest a sliding scale with a minor misdemeanor, maybe is the first offense, and then escalate to something more punitive beyond that. So I'm willing to give this a little bit more thought, other than just right off the top of my hat. I mean, it's a practical matter. I don't know how often anyone in our housing court is ever getting the full first degree misdemeanor penalty, but I mean, it's there potentially.
It's a good point. That's the maximum.
What's the maximum?
The
first
sorry,
degree.
to Councilman Cobb's point, it's a maximum fine and jail sentence, not a minimum.
And the other, I guess, concern about that is the potential that you end up with a criminal record if it's more than a minor misdemeanor on your record, criminalizing it. And chances are you're going to have a lot of landlords that are going to have to incur hiring an attorney if it's anything beyond a minor misdemeanor, or if they don't have sufficient funds, the court will have to appoint them representation.
So I'm hearing that your preference is to start with a minor misdemeanor, maybe a sliding scale. How does that sound to other folks? That
Question,
sounds fine to me.
have you talked to Judge Costello at all regarding this?
Not regarding this specific piece of legislation.
Okay.
And I'm not sure you can do that, Mr. Law Director. Can you run legislation by a,
Not legislation, just the thought of the penalties or.
okay,
I'm not prepared to provide a legal opinion on that as I sit here, but I think that it may not be the best practice.
and it's some canon of ethics thing that's ringing in the back of my mind.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, as a particular specific point, the councilman can talk to the judge, but the judge may feel restricted in what information he can provide because he wouldn't want to prejudice his future decision making.
Makes sense.
If anyone has any other feedback, maybe send it to Addie, she could compile it, share it with me, and then I could follow up with the law department. So thank you very much for sharing this overview, and thank you, Mr. President, for allowing us a few extra minutes.
Yes.
Could you share those options with us?
Yes.
And then
I can send them to.
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, good idea.
So, item number 3, goals, potential legislation. You know, we don't have a lot of time left, and we do have a few more things on the agenda. I want to bring up a few things. This is certainly not my comprehensive list for what I want to accomplish this year. And then, you know, we definitely need to, when we get to you, we'll talk about, you know, what we do as a council. But I do want to discuss and write up something with the law department, and maybe, you know, this would be something that that could be introduced in the finance committee or at least referred to the finance committee at some point. I want to change the due date for the budget. That's one initiative. I'm thinking about November 1st with a preliminary budget on the 15th, but I also think we need to be a little bit specific in this legislation. The charter and the Ohio Revised Code say November 15th or before. You don't want to go so far before, it's like this bed's too hard, this bed's too soft. I want to find a nice sweet spot where we're not, kind of like trying to figure out what we're doing on Christmas Eve, but I don't want to make it so early that, the administration is, just not able to get to the finish line. So that's one thing. Another thing I would like to do is I would like the Administrative Services Committee, Councilman Cobb, to review pretty much all of 111. Specifically though, I want to start with 11102. Hopefully we could start this process, at the next meeting. There's some kind of ambiguities and conflicts about when the mayor calls for a special meeting and how and who can prepare the agenda with other parts of not the charter, but other ordinances that say the council president and the council clerk prepare the agenda. So I want to make sure that we can look at 1102, but we look at all of 111 and make sure that it comports not only with each other, the other 111s, but also with the charter. So that's another thing I'd like to do. When we do finally come up with a date to meet as we're reviewing the Charter Review Commission recommendations, I want to look pretty carefully at the finance section of the charter. That's not an ordinance or anything I'm going to propose, but it is something that we'll kind of naturally do, I think, as part of our charter review. And Councilman Cobb, can you remind me what we talked about with the Cedar Fairmount loan forgiveness? Where did we end up there? Do we need legislation for that, or?
Yes, and I think Brian Anderson was gonna look at that. This goes back to last year. I'm not sure that he's had an opportunity to do that. I don't know when the program will roll out under the ARPA situation, but
I know that's a possibility.
But this has been now a year.
Yeah.
So I would just think that we need to do some legislation on that. But you and I are both on that board, so.
Understood.
Can I just make a point? So you guys are on the board and we are currently,
I'm sorry, the noise is hard to hear you, I'm sorry, Mary.
you guys are on the board. Technically, I'm represented on the board as well through a designee. And we are currently discussing for giving a loan for this organization for some reason.
This discussion predates us and goes back to ARPA from before.
Was it a council
It goes
meeting?
back. This goes back to when we were having discussions on ARPA a year ago about they had asked us to forgive their loan.
But was it discussed in a meeting? 'Cause
It was discussed here and Council Russo came in front of us, in fact, at a committee of the whole and asked for loan forgiveness in connection with, we were discussing nonprofits and making awards to nonprofits. And that was their request of us, although they didn't submit anything formally.
Okay.
Did you want to say something?
Well, I do remember vaguely this happening. I do remember though, I believe Guidehouse was the one that said that was not the reason that it fell off of the conversation was because it did not qualify under the
So
ARPA terms that need to be
I
done.
guess my next question is that it's coming up and produced, and we're talking up, and the legislation is coming up, and I know this predates that, but this looks a little odd. If to be honest, I don't know if the two of you should be touching it at this point, if this is what we're gonna do.
We can't.
But that's even the initiating this conversation is a little uncomfortable for me because I there's some pieces here I'm hearing now, and I have some concerns, even that we're continuing this conversation with the two of you in this. So I don't know what our plan is, but I don't know if we should be developing any future plans with the conversation that you two just initiated at this table. I don't think that should continue. I just don't.
I would agree with Councilman Maddox that the recusal, stepping back from a subject matter where there may be a conflict is not just voting, it's discussing, initiating and so forth.
Understood. I just, we go to these meetings, they keep bringing it up, I don't know how, I mean, we're the
Why
only
there's
people
a
there,
prohibition against it.
so it wouldn't be like somebody else would bring it up. All right,
Mr. President.
yeah,
I did want to point out, I appreciate, I have benefited, thanks to the Biden-Harris administration from loan forgiveness, and I appreciate that a great deal related to student loans. However, this is a collection of building owners, property owners that have, agreed to, add an additional assessment to their property taxes essentially in order to fund certain things in support of their business district. And they took a loan. And so I should I recuse myself from any of this discussion, even though maybe I should
We should probably pick it up offline, but this goes back, I think, to Resolution 152, 2021, which was a $35,000 loan to the Special Improvement District, after which, by the way, they expanded their borders and submitted a new plan and got reapproved for a new 5-year plan of services.
okay, we'll talk about this later.
all right, thank you. I just wanna know yes.
Are you, we're still talking about council goals in this?
Yeah, I just wanna, I wanna hear from other
This
people.
is connected to
I just wanna make sure that I'm okay, that I got an okay from at least the majority to look at legislation to change the budget due date. And I guess do I need any kind of consensus on council to refer an idea to a committee? I don't think so.
Not from my perspective, but
Okay.
you have your working rules, so
Yeah, well,
I don't remember what they said
Yeah.
about that.
So 11102, okay. So any objection to the going forward with the law department on the due date for the budget? Okay. I mean, obviously, this will be something that, will be aired out in committee event and then eventually with council as a whole. You had something you wanted to?
Yeah, going back to our 2025 goals, the first one that I had and I really want to discuss tonight, and I know I brought this up in new business at the previous meeting, was kind of for the conversation we just had, but I think this council really needs to set some boundaries and parameters and some training around risk mitigation and risk management, whether it's annual training, whether it's something concrete. And so there are several areas that I really see some high levels of risk that I don't think we've addressed at all, that I think would resolve some of these. And one of them is around our communications and our meetings. I think anything that we can do in terms of annual schedules for risk assessments, things that we can do in terms of onboarding for new council members, I think it's going to help mitigate as much risk as we possibly can in terms of some of any possible or potential violations, not just in private meetings, but as we're connecting with our with boards. I think we need to have some policies and protocols in place. I think it'll absolutely help give us some structure, and not just for the council, but for anyone else that we think deems necessary for this. But I think any type of risk mitigation or risk management training, any kind of annual assessments, I think are going to be helpful, not just from an educational standpoint, but also from an accountability standpoint, so that we have something we can stand on and say that it's clear what we understand and what we don't, to avoid some of these things. I think are going to be critical going forward. I think, as we discuss even what's happening with the current situation, and we talk about the investigation, I think there are still some things that we don't have to wait for that feedback on. And in terms of risk management, risk mitigation, and again, that those training policies, I don't think we have to wait for everything to come out, because right now we're still operating under the same kind of guidelines or understanding, at least that's where I am, that we've had previously, which means the door for that risk is still open. And unless we do anything to kind of mitigate that, I don't see any change. And I want to make sure that that's just not a risk, an inherent risk that we can just kind of check off in 2025. So I think starting at the beginning of this year, I think it's important either we see what other cities are doing, other HR departments, but we need some type of risk management and risk mitigation policies in place, from everything for our public meetings and communications to how we interact with outside boards and commissions in those roles. I think it'll help tighten things up and keep us from putting the city at risk at any possible fines. I've spoken to several people in terms of the state of Ohio and had these conversations about what other municipalities are doing, and in terms of risk and that impact. And some of these fines wouldn't be just directed at council members, but the city would have to pay those as well. And so again, anything that we can do systemically in January to not only make sure that we have some guardrails as a council, but to make the residents feel more comfortable that we're working on this, I think is going to be critical. And I don't think we necessarily need any investigation to be complete to look at any risk assessments that we might have as a council. But I think right now we're operating under the same education and parameters that we are. And so from where I'm sitting, at least, we're still in the same level of risk for some things that happen inappropriately. And so I'd like to see what the council does in terms of those parameters around that.
Anything besides that?
The other thing that I had was just from a planning and strategy, and I know part of what we're doing is this in terms of talking about, I think we need to have a clear vision or a clear agenda for what we want to accomplish as a council legislatively. And so there's some areas that I just think as we're having these conversations that we might want to look at. Number one is a clear legislative schedule. We know that we're going to add and take away things, but I think it's helpful for the public if they can see the schedule in terms of what our plans are and how we're moving through any processes or programs or new legislative ideas. I think would be helpful online.
Do you mean like a schedule for our meetings for the year, or?
No, like a plan for any legislative items maybe we're working on or we put on the back burner, so that as things come up, that the public can kind of see that timeline or how long something's been sitting there or what needs to be removed. I think it'll feel like for project management kind of standpoint, so you can see
high level overview.
Yeah, of everything that we're touching. In addition, I think we need to have needs assessments. In terms of, by needs assessments, I mean our staffing needs as a council, any needs in terms of how we communicate or engage with the community and other organizations. So I think what does this council need to be more effective? I think that conversation as part of that would be helpful. In addition to some of our process improvement goals, whether it be how we work through legislation, again, any communication processes, again, the dates for our financing, any reporting or things like that. I think looking at that on an annual basis will be helpful as part of this. And then the last thing that I added in this was any communications and staffing goals that we have in terms of enhancing community engagement, I think, or enhancing our staff in any way. I think we need to have those conversations as a whole. And the reason I'm bringing that up tonight is I know on the agenda we're discussing communications, and I think we should have that conversation in terms of a broader standpoint of what we would want, what does that look like, and the why. And I think it'll help clarify that for us and the public in terms of not just our engagement part of that, but what impact it might have financially, what impact it might have in any future planning that we're having on council. So those are just some list of things that I think as we talk about how to work through any 2025 goals, that if we add these things, I think it'll help give us clarity. But the two biggest for me will be risk management and certainly process improvements, because those things are going to help us tighten up some things and ensure that we're kind of protecting ourselves from some things in the future.
All right, yes,
I think that we'll see legislation coming as a result of the climate resilience plan. Working with Coordinator Boateng and through the Climate and Environmental Sustainability Committee, they're very involved in looking at things that would affect, come out of the climate resilience plan or be something that could be added to the city. And also transportation mobility is really looking at a lot of, they're looking at Vision Zero, they're looking at complete and green streets, those policies, how are they being followed? So I think you'll see some legislation coming out of those organizations and processes.
okay, great. And is that in coordination with the administration, I would take it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, I would like to continue the legislation for lifeguards for the pool. I think Director Hannah and I started to talk about that before the budget, as far as to tighten up some of that legislation so we could actually have some lifeguards for the pool. So I'd like to finish that up. Also, that's probably good that Councilman Maddox talked about legislation that's been out there and been kind of mulling around. I talked about before the Archer report, having a living wage resolution for the employees. It was suggested I wait until the Archer report came out, so that's one reason I'm really anxious to see what the Archer report says. So I don't want that to die away.
So those are two separate things, the Archer report and the
Archer report
and a living wage.
and living wage resolution, as well as tightening up the things around the what I said, the pool.
Oh, right.
Yeah, the pool, as well as tightening up the legislation around the dog park. And I'm quite sure we don't need legislation for the splash pad, but I really need some updates, some more consistent updates on that, because we're getting a lot of emails. I know I'm getting a lot of emails regarding the splash pad and what's going on, where is the equipment, we know it's here, but we need to start to see some updates on that. That's been hanging out there since a long time now.
So an update, not legislation.
Update or legislation, whatever's needed for that.
Yes,
We actually did provide an update toward the end of last year.
I'm sorry,
We did provide an update toward the end of last year. If the council will remember the discussion
Yes.
around ARPA funding for some of the work that's being done at Denison.
Yes.
That included some of the underlying foundational preparation for the site that is required in order to actually install
I remember that.
the splash pad. So that's the work that we are currently doing, because in the initial conception of this splash pad idea, that was neglected. And so we're correcting that.
Yes, I do remember that update. I just need, I'm just asking for a continued update as we move forward until 2025.
All right.
Those are a couple things right off the top of my head.
Okay, anybody else? All right, we're really up against it here, so Councilman Posh,
Let's defer this one.
okay. Just so you know, we were talking about an expectation meeting, actually, Councilman Maddox actually kind of really dovetails on that, so we do need to do that. Addie, I just asked you to put this on the for the 21st, so we don't leave this behind. Do we have, Addie can't be here on the 18th. This is for the Charter Review Commission recommendation workshop. a mouthful. Could we possibly do is everybody available on the 25th? Cause then we could have Addie.
Yep.
Law director?
I should be able to be available. I have a haircut scheduled currently.
We'll cut your hair.
What time?
So we were looking at 9 to 3.
I will have to come in
Okay,
after. I will previously in Akron.
so you can do the afternoon part. Okay, everybody else is good for the 25th? Yeah. All right, it's not something you can phone in for, or like, okay, got it, okay, I just, yeah. Okay, good, so that's the 25th, and, it's, communications, put that on for next meeting. The council calendar, is everybody still good with July being the month we take off? I mean, there's others, I realize there's more to the calendar than that, but we can't really talk about the end of the year at this point, but we're all good with July still. And then just make sure that you constantly feed Addie any days you know you're not gonna be here. That's real helpful for us. And Addie will keep sending out a calendar weekly to us so that we could, if we forget to look, she's gonna give us something else to look at.
I might have missed it, you probably said it. We're gonna be discussing Councilman Posh's goals and things that he wanted
Yeah,
as well
on the 21st.
on the 21st.
Yeah. All right, since it's
We don't
7:30,
need a motion.
I'm recessing this meeting because we're coming back, or what am I?
You're gonna recess it pending your council meeting and then come back to finish committee of the whole.
Okay. So this committee is in recess. All right, welcome back to the Committee of the Whole meeting. We're resuming this Committee of the Whole meeting for the purpose of coming up with needs that this council has to pass a 2025 long-term budget. I read mine in the previous meeting. I'm gonna read them again because that way I only take up 60 seconds or less. And then you guys can please let me know or let all of us know what yours are. So I wanna know what the city's unencumbered balance is for 2024. I'd like to have, since it's now January, October, November, and December's financials. This is, again, something we've always had before we voted on a budget. I'd like to see the results of the state's 2023 audit. We're 7 months out of compliance right now. I'd like to see the results of the council's independent CPA firm's review that hopefully will start this week. It's gonna be a review of the 2024 budget and any suggestions they might have on the 2025 budget. And then I wanna see the Archer salary study because if that impacts what this council wants to do with budgeting next year, I think it would be very informative. I wanna see an estimate of other probable salary increases. And I would like to have an executive session on the 21st of this month. I have emailed the mayor about having an executive session regarding the status of I want to carefully word this, of the service workers union contract negotiations.
May I pause for a second? Did you just mention that you wanted to see the salary increases?
No,
What did you just say?
I wanna,
Apologize.
that's okay. I wanted to see I wanna have an executive session where we speak with the union negotiator for the service workers union contract.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and then a capital budget based on real numbers, not estimates. And, you know, and then I put the catch-all at the end, which is council's outstanding questions. And let me amend that to council's outstanding questions that are relevant to what we need, information we need to vote on a 2025 budget. Sorry. So why don't we just go around the room and we can start anywhere you want.
I just have one, I have a question. And I'm, because I wasn't at the meeting, I did kind of see some of it, so I just need you all to kind of tell me what I heard or what I didn't hear. With his new budget, are there still lines with
It's not a
deficit?
budget,
I mean,
it's his appropriation. The data he sent out is an appropriations plan. He's trying to, he wants us to understand what we were dealing with was the budget in that we started seeing on the 19th of November. The report that he's sending to us is what he proposes for expenditures in 2025.
And I'll just tell you what my position on this is. We need to stop, and I mean, we in the administration need to stop talking past each other. I mean, that's, you know, the law of the land right now is the temporary budget. That is what's in place, okay? What we need to do is we need to make that budget, that temporary budget work. I passed out an email that I sent to the mayor on December 23rd with 5 items on it. These are the things we need, that we believe we need to make the temporary budget work. And then, you know, I mean, if the mayor thinks the best idea is to have an appropriations budget and then eventually, an appropriations piece of legislation and then a budget, I think that's an extra step we don't need to do. That's my personal opinion. But, you know, we can't say, you know, this is what we want to do. And then the answer is something that's not what we're talking about. We need to talk.
so let me be clear, and
Yeah.
I don't mean to be
That's okay.
interrupted, I'm just trying to be clear. So what you're saying is we're gonna be focusing on the temporary budget.
Making the temporary budget work and what we need to pass a 2025 budget.
Information we need to give
If the
him.
majority of council wants to focus on appropriations, then I need to hear that from, you know, 2025 appropriations. But I haven't heard that yet. So right now, I'm going with what is in place, and that is the temporary budget and our charge to on or before March 31st, come up with a year, you know, an annual budget for the year.
So let's just focus on the temporary budget for just a moment here,
Okay.
okay? Because I think we want to pass the city budget, but we need to make sure the temporary budget is working, and we need to
And that's
make-
what that email does.
Exactly, but this is sort of like to make sure that we're clear. I mean, we're laser focused and we're clear that you're right, the temporary budget is the law of the land, but it can be modified. And it's
Right.
probably gonna have to be modified because staff is busy doing their job. If they're gonna buy the fire truck and they need to get it and they need to buy it and they need to put that order in, it's gotta go, I mean, we need to make sure the process that staff is using and how that's getting to council
And
gets
that's-
approved in the temporary form.
Right, so that's what the memo is about, the December 23rd memo. And I made sure that all directors and assistant directors have seen that memo.
And if I could add something to that, so my understanding of the mayor's response was that he acknowledged that if there are changes that need to be made, it's incumbent on the administration to bring that to us. Am I understanding that correctly? Did other people
That's,
have the same
That's my
reading of
understanding.
his response? Just so that we're on the same page.
I just want you to know that I sent that memo on December 23rd. The first time I heard back on that was Friday, January 3rd.
Right.
And he acknowledged what you just said.
Okay.
Can you share that with us,
Sure,
that response?
sure.
I thought he sent it temporary.
I think,
If possible.
Okay.
is that it?
No,
That's not it?
Well, this is the 23rd.
that's the original memo.
Oh.
That's the memo. The mayor's
No, I
response.
got that one.
The mayor's,
I
yeah.
had that.
You could, Tangel wants that, so you can give
Thank you.
that extra copy to him.
Merry Christmas to me.
I like that he raised his hand. Teacher. Any other, I mean, come on, I'm sure you have other needs, questions that need to be answered before we pass before we vote on a 2025 budget?
So I do, and I've got a 20-page document that I'm sharing with everybody. You know, we're not gonna go through 20 pages right now. But I think we need more clarity when we talk about the capital items. My expectation is getting a status of the capital items that were approved last year, where they are, which ones were completed, which ones need to get carried over into this coming year, and maybe even delayed even further. So I think we need to have a very, very clear list of what those capital items are, because the ones that are carrying over certainly impact things.
Can I say one quick thing about the capital budget?
Mhm.
Because I know you're gonna go on to other things. I like the idea of the mayor saying, here are the ideas, and then we talk about if we like them, if we have any additions, if we have any subtractions.
Like we did.
I didn't like the idea of us just like brainstorming.
And
Yeah,
And I'm gonna say why. Because it is unfair, number one, for the mayor to even ask us to do that. And number two is because we have not had any contact with any director in
Well, that's
any
the key.
department to find out all year what they need, what they don't need, what's happening in the department. So we are actually sitting here from a disadvantage because we have no clue what's happening in our own city because we have not had those dialogues.
we don't.
But if we had those dialogues, for example, and I gotta go back to when I came on board, when Parks and Rec's chair, I was communicating, I was in there, I was with Joe McGray. I was there all the time. I knew exactly so when it came to the budget, seniors needed this, parks needed this, people needed this. I was able to give an opinion on what they needed. I have no clue what Eric needs. I'm on the Parks and Recs committee, but Anthony is the chair. We have not had one meeting. And that's the only committee I'm on with him. I can't even tell you what the Parks and Recs needs other than what they did not fulfill when I was the Parks and Recs chair. I'm not able to meet with Director Zamp at all. So,
I mean, that's the place to start.
yeah, so how do we as council people talk about a capital budget when we have no clue what's needed or what's going on?
Can I add one thing on
Yeah.
capital? So I agree that capital, that is a requirement for me. That
Me
needs
too.
to be included. It was done in previous years. Department by department, they were able to make requests and then council could decide which of those things they wanted to fund. And this year, they were able to do it for some of the departments and others, as we know, either zero or a small number was included, but below there were lists of 2025 capital requests not in 2025 budget. To your point, you are the folks who know best. So come to us with these requests. That's necessary to create a complete budget in my mind. And that's separate from the long-term capital plan, which I agree is important and that we need to have. But that long-term capital conversation, for me, is not necessary to pass a budget for this year.
And we have to have a capital budget because as things start to fall apart, that's what makes our city run.
Yeah.
Those are the things that keep our city moving and running and all of those things.
But it's not mutually exclusive to not have, I mean, we could still have a collaboration.
Yes.
It's just, we just need a starting point. So go ahead. I know you got some stuff to blow through.
Well, there's a bunch of nuance when it comes to these capital items, okay? So we not only have, what was the 24 issues, but we also have what was given to us in the budget book, which is, you alluded to, which were some of the things totaled up in the capital funds, some were requests, the numbers didn't necessarily match. And that kind of comes down to, we need a clean budget book that breaks all this stuff down by department. And for those capital items that are in there, and if they're requests, we need to have some idea if they have like an end of life, for example. So you look at a fire truck, you know, how old, maybe a favorite example, it's a big ticket item is, okay, is it 14 years old? We think it's 14 years old. I think that's what I heard. Okay, and you know, when was it scheduled to go in? To be replaced? Has it been delayed? Can it be delayed again? I mean, or not delayed? I mean, so this is where we need to have some idea of the importance of these items. Because that has not been shared with us because we've been disconnected from working and meeting with individual departments. You know, I would love to be able to put in this conversation that we need to have more interaction with departments, but I think that's outside the scope of the budget. I think we just have to find a way of working with the new city administrator, the mayor, to try to get a process in place where we're actually looking at these things. So a couple things I've mentioned. We need to look back at 24. We need to prioritize 25 capital items. We need them encapsulated in a budget book. And on top of that, we have a standing practice in Cleveland Heights that gives us departmental totals. So if you sort of look at all the totals that we had, and then you compare those to the totals of what the total expenses are, they're different. Is about a $8 to $9 million difference. And those items, those $8 to $9 million items, well, they sort of fall into the finance department because, you know, some of them is hospitalization, but those don't get discussed.
But again, that is something you need before you vote on it.
It's something that I need
I don't
to,
mean you, just you, but.
I need schedules by department, and I need schedules for those things that are not in a department, and they need to total up on what we see in the grand totals. And yeah, you need to compare that against the kind of a starting unencumbered balance, an ending projected balance. We need to be able to look at all that.
Right.
And that has to be in a clean budget book.
And I need a balanced budget. I don't want a budget that has deficits, have lines that's deficits, and we don't have any explanation for them.
And the one thing I worry about at the December 30th meeting that Councilman Cobb and I, all the mayor did was recalculate some expenditures. I mean, he re-estimated. That's all I heard. I didn't hear actually any budget cut. So the fact that we went from having a small deficit to a small balance, I mean, we didn't really do anything there, but keep going.
Well, I mean, there's this whole concept of how big of a deficit is gonna be palatable. I mean, when you look at the numbers and look at what has been, I mean, we've been running, I believe the city's been running on a continual deficit for a couple of years right now. And I think we need to get confirmation of that. I mean, one, we can't confirm it in the 2023 financials because we don't have clean 2023 financials. So we need to get that cleared up.
But so far, if we do a capital budget, a full capital budget, if we get the Archer study and we, you know, see what that, if all these things happen, what trajectory, if we hire 15 new employees, we do all this, what trajectory are we putting, you know, that's where we're headed.
If I could respond directly to that, that's why I have continued to talk about needing a complete budget, a budget that creates a complete and accurate picture. And that's necessary before you can talk about the merits. You need to know, okay, does this include all of the anticipated expenses? Okay, now that it does, this would give us such and such surplus or deficit. And then at that point, you could say, okay, these 15 employees, help us to understand why each of these are necessary.
Why you need to give us the
But
data
you
on
can't
it.
do that. You can't discuss
we don't-
those merits before it's, you know, fleshed out.
So what I hear you saying is we need to go in a certain order as well as whatever the
Right, we need
lines are. Go ahead.
all of these.
Yeah, so there's gonna be a piece to this where you're looking, I mean, I believe the conventional wisdom numbers, we have 50 unfilled positions, is that what I heard? I mean, I don't know if they're seasonal, I don't know if they're not, so I mean, we
Those
have.
were the,
Go ahead.
not to
No,
cut you
please.
off, no,
No,
those
we're
were
suspending all that.
full-time, regular positions, whatever the number was, and I excluded the seasonal positions.
So when you hear a statement that we've heard from staff about we need more additional resources because we can't get the work done, okay? But there's 50 unfilled positions. So that rings, it's a red flag. It needs more I mean, maybe it's not, but for me, it's a red flag until we can get some clarification on it. It's like, okay, so where are these 50 employees at? Is it like all in police? I don't think so, but I know they're down. I mean, where do they fit? What kind of savings have we gotten from them? Because what I'm a little afraid of, if we start looking at last year's financials that are 50 down employees, and all of a sudden we're higher up to those 50, we're gonna blow through a budget. We're not gonna get the kind of savings that we got this year, because there should be a huge budget savings
that's
this
true.
year. And
But those 50 positions are budgeted for.
yeah, but do we get a savings this year? Do we not get a savings?
Right.
This is where I think we need to have this accounting firm that's coming in, that's
So
gonna help give
let's-
us some advice.
Just in the interest of time, let's try to blow through as many, here's what we need as possible.
The 50, clarification on these 50 employees. And what does it look like in the balance sheets? Does someone wanna take another turn? I mean, I've got more
Jump in,
things.
Joe.
But yeah, we don't have to go Robert's rules here.
I mean,
Just go.
back to what I said, needing to like understand, and see a complete budget. So those capital items, other known expenses, so for example, there is a general consensus that we want to increase compensation, make compensation more competitive. So a summary, an estimate for increases from the Archer survey, a potential estimate for the renegotiated 860 contract. By happenstance, I asked about the grant match from the US Department of Transportation. There's a $200,000 match that we have to make. The mayor said that wasn't in there. Make sure that that's in there. And really any other known expenses need to be folded in there. So those are the things that I would.
Because if we, go ahead, Gail, I'm sorry.
I would like to follow up on what you just said, and then I have a couple of comments. It was my understanding when we had the hearings on the budget that Tara Schuster told us that the COLA, whether they decided on 2% or 3%, was rolled into the appropriations budget, the appropriations. It was my understanding that she did some kind of estimate. I'm trying to avoid having Mr. Feltz or Mr. Hairston have to go back and redo all the work that was done on what came to us to begin with, right? That those estimates for what it was gonna cost possibly for the service union contract were rolled into the original.
I believe that's the case,
Mhm.
Oh,
Yes,
At least the COLA was,
yeah.
the COLA was,
but I'm pretty
Not-
sure.
that's it.
but the
I don't think-
renegotiation, I don't think was.
Okay.
We don't know that, do we?
I can
So
check.
we don't know that. Can you find that?
Well, I think the mayor said that it's not, and because he was saying like, well, and law director, stop me before I get too far, but maybe we might not wanna show our hand, something to that effect,
So every
which
number that,
insinuated to me that it wasn't included. Sorry.
so every single number that we see, like a personnel number, there needs to be some schedule for that.
Yeah,
And so
but
there's gonna be an estimate.
yes.
There's gonna be, okay, the COLA increase, and in the service workers thing, there should be a line in there. Or if it's not a line, we need to know what the total value of, or the total expenses we currently have for the service workers. And then we need to know if they're gonna get like a 1%, 2%, 1,000%, whatever it is. We can do the math then and actually, look at what we've done with police and fire and get a sense of really what the impact is. But every single number that actually shows up, there needs to be a schedule for it. And if you ask, well, if someone calculated this number and it has the COLA number in it, there's gotta be in some spreadsheet someplace.
Yeah.
And that generally is the kind of thing that you're gonna see in a budget. Either is a schedule or an asterisk item that said, yeah, it was this last year and we're increasing everything by.
That would be Tara as the analyst in-house to be doing that. So I think the work is there. I just wanna make sure that if she's already done it, we don't recreate it. We have to have, if he doesn't wanna give us the 2022 actuals and the 2023 actuals, we need to have 2024 actuals in a spreadsheet or a setup like this. Because how many years did you say, I need to see a comparison? An appropriations spreadsheet is not enough.
No.
for us to make the decision about the budget. Now, I realize that we don't actually vote on a budget, we vote on the appropriations, right? I've looked back at what we did last year.
Yeah,
But we confused the two. I wanna be comfortable with each department's personnel services, OTPS, their capital requests, other.
did we have that last year?
This was the basis for every page, every department had a page
Right,
in that budget book that Andy and Natick put
the
together.
comparisons.
We had the beginnings of it with the mayors, except for the capital. And I agree, we
Thank you
need,
for remembering that.
I'm so impressed with you that you were asking for that, I said, that makes sense. We have to be able to compare, and then we also have to have revenues. You know that, we can't do this without, Craig, you know that, we can't do this without revenues. So we're back to having a budget book or some semblance of it.
Yep.
That we can have as our product, that it can be posted on the website for our citizens to see.
We don't have a budget book posted on the website now.
Yes, we do, we have the one that.
When did that happen?
Today, yesterday.
Okay,
Oh, really?
I finally got they had to get into Tara's, IT had to get into Tara's computer, it took a long time.
And you
I
think
finally got
about
it.
it,
No,
we
but
need to
I'm
hire
just-
50
I can
people.
scan every one of
We
those
need to
pages.
give people a living wage. There is no way in hell we're gonna be able to hire 50 people and give everybody a living wage for what they deserve. We're gonna go right through the budget.
Well,
So we may not be able to hire 50 people. If we give our employees what they need to do the job right.
So
it's possible.
just, I'm not,
It could end up that way.
so
Yeah. Cause employees are money.
I would also say in this, that the issues that you have iterated that we need information on, that you've iterated that we need information, Jim, Craig and Davida. Is it realistic even to get all that before
16th or
the
whenever.
14th?
14th.
Wait, we don't need all the information by the 14th. What we need is the mayor and the finance director, or who's ever preparing this materials, to have that for us, the information for us, before we get a revised budget and we vote.
Okay, so what my agenda is saying, we're gonna get updates on the list that you gave. And do I need to add to my agenda responding to?
Well, Addie's creating one.
Yeah, I would like a comprehensive list that I'm going to just send and say, these are what council needs,
Okay,
period. That's what they're requesting.
okay.
Addie,
So-
quick question, where's the budget?
It's on city council's page.
Well,
Whose
it probably needs to
The
be,
budget book that was provided to you guys is on the
Oh,
city
that
council's
one.
webpage
so
now.
these are mine right there.
Yeah, I already
Okay.
So Addie, you've got the list that will go to the administration?
Yes,
So is this, is
and I'll go over this report.
when we meet on the 14th, are we meeting for the temporary budget, or are we meeting for the?
We're meeting to put a plan in place, don't use the word process. A plan
Cause
in
that gets you a
place
long email.
for, that tells us that we try to get as much information as we can. The 14th is to find out what do we
It's a
have,
plan.
what do we have?
Yeah, 14th.
But how do we secure the 3-month, the temporary budget? Remember, we had to make sure that
That's-
works
It's-
and
it
operates.
That's the memo and the mayor's, adherence to
You
it.
guys have voted for it.
And so
I
if there
know,
are
but-
changes that he wants to make, then he has to come to council, because that's the law. Tonight, we amended it, and we can make more amendments, but he acknowledged that if there are things that he needs that are not in there, he
You know
will
what,
come
you
to
know what it
council.
comes down to? We're gonna be doing the exact same thing we do when we have a budget anyway, which is
We have budget adjustments.
we have budget adjustments
Okay.
coming at us left and right. So this is nothing, there is nothing new with this temporary budget, nothing.
So if I could, so we were talking about earlier, possibly using the meeting on the 14th to build a consensus for the things that we would require in order to be comfortable with passing something. Well, we've already started that conversation
Right.
now, and Addie's going to pass along that comprehensive list. So during that meeting on the 14th or sooner, if we're able to schedule it, are we going to use that as an opportunity to get status updates on each of those things? Is that our, okay, so Addie, we've compiled the list, Addie sends it over, and then we'll be able to go through and say, okay, these are the things that we've received, these are the things that are outstanding.
And I'll tell you what, Davida and I will make sure at every leadership meeting that we go through this stuff. It will happen once a week, no matter what. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen in other venues and, you know.
Eddie can almost give us what he has supplied, and then we can say this is what we need.
Okay, can I,
Oh, question. Did everyone receive your questions with the mayor's answers?
I did.
I just copied this and it just so happened to have the mayor's answers on it, yes.
Did you all receive my 40 questions with the mayor's answers?
I
I
did,
don't think I did.
You did?
I did.
I
You
did.
Could you make sure they get it? Because you all need to look at that.
I don't,
Are all yours relevant to the 2025 budget? Where there's some policy
I don't
questions
recall.
on here?
Some
I think there were
parts,
some
I believe those came on December 16th. And I believe they were sent by the mayor to us during the actual meeting. So you could look,
Oh, God.
that's my recollection. December 16th.
But it's all red.
Yeah, right. There's your questions and
But,
then,
and some of the questions, it says refer to the 16th. But I don't know what he's talking about. When he said refer to the 16th.
well, I think he separated out the questions that, he didn't really think were relevant to, I mean, I can't speak for him, but it seemed like there were some that he was putting off because they weren't relative to the budgets exactly.
it came on 12/17.
Okay.
Could you send it to them?
Yeah, it was forwarded to everyone, but I'll go for it again.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
So,
Hey, can I go through this list real quick, just so I know?
Can I just ask Posh one quick thing? You have so many valuable questions. Can you prioritize some of them for us for that meeting on the 14th? Things that really need to be done on the
Yes.
14th, or what you've given Addie, those are the things that are really important to you?
Sure.
Because many of them are unresolved.
I think the ones that I stated at this table are the highest of the priorities.
Okay, good, okay, thank you.
so you got a mouthful for the meeting. I mean, I'm just saying, if it was just the stuff we just talked about, I mean, that's my opinion, I don't know. I mean,
Bob, did
I
you
just
get
think
my
anything else would
I do,
overburden
yeah.
With the
that
answers?
one.
Yeah.
Oh, you got them in
Well,
red.
I just copied it over from the.
Okay.
But I wanna, is there anybody not getting, is there anything that, like, Gail needs these now?
We have to start someplace.
So are you gonna,
Yeah, can I read off the list?
I can give her some more about it. I can give you some more about it.
Unencumbered, end of year 2024 balance, October and November financials, the results of the state's 2020.
Well, October, November, and December, I mean, now that why not, you know? I mean, I
end of year
understand,
2020,
October and November is what we should have every year, no matter what. But now that
already-
it's January, why not, right?
Okay, so results of the state's 2023 financial audit, results of council's independent CPA firm's review of our 2024 budget, the results of the Archer salary study, estimates for other probable salary increases, a capital budget based on real numbers, not projections, answers to council's outstanding questions related to the budget, clarity regarding capital items for 2025, and the status of 2024 capital projects and which ones need to be carried over from 2024 to 2025. Clean budget book that breaks down budget by department with comparisons from year to year, departmental totals, schedules by department, schedules by funds not specific to a single department, information regarding the deficit the city has been running per year, past 5 years is what I said, clarification on 50 or so unfilled positions, and if there were savings in 2024, other known expenses for 2025 that were not in the budget, presented to council, estimates for increased salary, estimates for renegotiated local 860, grant matches, confirmed COLA was included in the budget presented.
Well, let's be careful.
It's
on the-
50,000
On the
under?
860, wait, hold on,
Okay,
let's be careful on that. We're not actually gonna do that.
Okay.
So,
I'm gonna leave
but there is information I would like to discuss in an appropriate venue. I'm sorry I'm being
That's,
coy, but this is not an appropriate venue.
Are they negotiating now?
Well, the contract's up March 31st. So if they come to an agreement, the new contract would start on April 1st. And, you know,
So they're they're in negotiations or they're not?
that I couldn't tell you.
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
But what we do know is 2.5 or, 2 3/4 months from now, the contract expires. That's what we know.
We also need to know if the revenues that we were given as projections during the budget hearings are where he is at right now, or does he wanna change any of those revenue estimates?
Well, he gave a pretty long explanation of his rationale.
Okay,
But-
but does it stay the same as what we've seen?
Yes, as far as I didn't see any
Okay,
change.
take that off,
Yeah.
take it off.
Then he needs to have a schedule of how those numbers were derived. I mean, maybe
You
he,
mean a schedule,
yeah,
like
maybe
a
they,
written
got a
schedule?
written
Okay,
schedule
got it.
detailing how those numbers were derived. I mean, that's,
It's verbal right now, as far as I know. I haven't seen anything in writing.
it's, this is sort of like, in the world of transparent finance, you gotta break everything out. So if any citizen wants to look at this budget book, they see how those numbers were calculated.
Yeah.
Where they came from. And it may be they came from the Cuyahoga County Budget Office. It may be as simple as that, okay? But at least there has to be,
I gave them, Gail's my witness, I gave them a copy of how the budget should look from day one. 4 columns, you look straight across. There, I don't understand why we can't have that.
Oh, we have
Every
a
other-
template from last year.
Every other budget community or agency does it. I mean, when I go to the Gateway Board overseeing the Jacobs Field and Gunn, all these, they don't have stuff like this.
Cobb and I were looking at Shaker and Lakewood and just,
yeah.
I mean,
Look at
it's-
their budget books.
it's just, it's like a masterpiece.
Yes, ours is terrible compared to theirs.
It's-
And I really
and that's,
want someone, I really want the CPA or someone to look at these numbers. Because our mayor has no experience in this. I mean, he wants to tell us that, but all you have to do is look at his job description for what he was at the county. He did not do budgets.
well,
He's not certified in none of this.
That is a concern, but I mean, I think the issue here is that's why you have a strong financial team behind you. Okay.
I understand that, but right now, he's doing it. He's doing it and he's giving us all the information, all the numbers. He said he's told us out of his own mouth, he worked on it.
but here's what we do have. We have a CPA going over the books from 2024. We have a new city administrator coming on who's done 8 budgets with Akron. And potentially another new finance director. I mean, maybe that'll all add up to maybe in February or something we could start, moving on it. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I know what the timeline is. So are we done with the, okay.
I really wanna talk about the CPA firm, Chuni, and what marching orders we have for them. And I think there's 2 more things. I mean, we need to be very clear, we need to have end of year fund balances. Now, part of the issue though is those fund balances, there's some monkeying around that all cities do at the end of the year where they sort of negate them all, which I believe that process already happened. But there's also usually some movement around how you initially fund those. That's what we did in the school district. I don't know if that process has happened, but you need to sort of a net neutral position. So what do these look like going into January 1st, 2025?
That's
What
why
do
the
they look
year-end
like?
December will give us that.
Yeah, that's why we need to have those numbers, okay? We're also missing bank reconciliation statement reports. Those don't seem to be in a regular item in our financials.
Is that part of the job description for the,
It's something, you really need to have that. You start with that when you start working backwards to do all your fund
so is
totals.
this in the scope of work that we,
No, this is what we as a city, this is what our finance department should have someplace. And
but are we charging the CPA firm that we're hiring to do that?
no, they can't, I mean, the CPA firm can't do it. I mean, you need
No,
to
they
have
can
access.
look at it and analyze it though.
And they should.
Okay,
Right, but we just don't have it.
They should.
Right.
We just need to have, and maybe it exists. I mean, I've asked for it, it's been on my list, and it's not been given to us. We need to see when the last one was done.
well, you got an ARPA spreadsheet, like
So you want most
eventually 3
recent,
months after you ask for it, right?
you want most recent.
The most recent. But that's sort of a critical item in order to help validate, okay, is it a good financial statement moving forward? I just need some clarity in our meeting on Tuesday, Wednesday, 17th.
Tuesday, 14th.
Tuesday the 14th. Oh, I screwed that one up. Okay, Tuesday the 14th. So we're going to give this list to the administration. We're hoping to meet with the administration as an agenda item. Just give us okay, what do you have, what don't you have? Do you have any questions? What do you need clarification? Can you put a time frame on that? Because that's gonna go, I mean,
Well,
So you're gonna post, I mean, you're gonna send this list to the next year?
no, wait,
Yeah.
Wait, go ahead.
I have the agenda ready to go.
Right,
Of course, it doesn't have this lengthy a list.
Right.
So I don't know if I refer to you've seen my draft for my agenda.
yeah, but I'm saying, is the plan to send it to the mayor and the finance director?
That's what we're talking about,
So that when they
something we
show
wanna
up-
do, yeah.
They already know,
We can't send that to them on Tuesday and expect them
No.
to tell us what
Right,
the status is.
right, okay.
I was thinking I would send it tomorrow.
Yeah,
I think the request was they wanted it as quickly as possible this week.
yeah,
Yeah, tomorrow's
That's
fair.
That's what it is.
that's fair.
I think that is fair.
Alright, any other additions?
Mr. President.
Yeah.
Something I've been alerted to some of the conversation that has been going on in here. I think I was referenced, my experience was referenced possibly in a disparaging way. And so I wanted to clear something up because apparently somebody's looking at a job description for a policy advisor for Cuyahoga County Council for 10 years. And I just wanted to point out, so I joined Cuyahoga County Council at the beginning, about 6 months into the new form of government down in the county. At that time, we had a staff of maybe 4. We had a chief of staff, senior legislative advisor, a legislative budget advisor, me, policy advisor, and we had an office manager as well. It's a relatively small staff. We had fewer staff than council members. We had 11 council members. And the work that we did was extremely collaborative. And so I had the opportunity to work on budgets at the county for Cuyahoga County Council. Now, I wasn't on the administrative side, so I didn't craft the budget. The administration does that. But I worked with the council alongside our legislative budget advisor, our senior policy advisor, and our chief of staff to work through the budget with the council members, make amendments, help the council members put together packages of changes for a massive budget compared to ours. And I did this year after year. Every year, even once we converted to a biennial budget and we only had the mid-biennium update on the off years. I don't know what job description you're looking at, But I'm sure it said something like other duties as assigned. So if you are making an assertion that I'm padding my resume,
Oh, no, I didn't say that.
okay,
Never said that.
I appreciate that.
Never said that. I've said certified as an accountant or CPA.
Oh, no.
We're looking-
Absolutely not an accountant. However, to say that I am not qualified as the duly elected mayor of this city to produce a budget, I mean, I'm the person who can and who has the responsibility under our charter to provide an estimate of the revenues and expenditures and recommendations for appropriations. Now, I believe that the people of Cleveland Heights elected me in 2021 because of the experience that I've had here at the city, scrutinizing and passing budgets for years, and at the county, helping county council members understand, make amendments, and pass budgets for years. And the result of that experience, coupled with the training that I've had from what was the #2 urban policy school in the nation at the time, led me to do things like teach public finance at Notre Dame. This kind of experience does not make me qualified to be the finance director, but it certainly provides me with a great deal of qualification to do the work that I'm doing right now for the city of Cleveland Heights, for the residents of Cleveland Heights, for the workers of Cleveland Heights, to produce a sound budget, which I believe I've done.
Okay, thank
And
you.
so I'd like to just make sure that that's on the record for people to understand. Because I don't believe that it is appropriate, and new year, new us, right? New leaf. Let's turn a new leaf, and let's keep it positive, let's keep it forward moving, and recognize that we've all got different qualifications that prepare us for different tasks. And my entire set of experiences and training have absolutely prepared me for this particular task.
And I thank you so very much for that clarification. And speaking of the budget, I'm talking about certified, certificate, and CPA. That's what I was talking about. And that's what we all are talking about. When you heard me say, and I've been saying it for I don't know how long, someone needs to look at the numbers, someone who is professional. You have some experience. That does not say Posh doesn't. He has experience. That doesn't say Jim doesn't. He has experience. That doesn't say everyone on council have some experience with numbers or finances. But you have said publicly that you're not an expert in finance. You said that at one of the council meetings.
I'm absolutely not
And-
qualified to be a finance director for the city of Cleveland Heights.
but
and
that's
that is
not what you
the job
said.
I have,
That's
and
not what-
not the job I'm going for.
I understand that, but that's not what you said. And so, but it has been said that people around here are stupid. We don't know what we're doing. We don't know what we're talking about. And all I'm saying is everybody have their own experience level that maybe you or other council people don't even know about. So let's stay positive. If we're gonna stay positive, so for the 2025, let's stay positive with
I don't
everybody.
think I said anything negative about anybody's experience.
Oh, okay,
I think what I've said tonight
all right.
is a detailed description of my experience and how it prepares me for the work that I'm doing right now on a fiscal year 2025 budget for the city of Cleveland Heights. And I don't know if you've watched the December 30th meeting or not. I urge you to watch it if you have not. I do explain some of the things that some council members have expressed concern and confusion about. So I do urge you to start there as sort of a primer on budgeting generally and this budget specifically that I'm introducing.
I've watched it.
Okay.
I watched it. So that does not take away that council, who is the body that needs to vote on a budget, balanced budget, is not aware of what they're doing either. So I'm just wanna put that on the record.
All right, well, listen, I appreciate all this, but it's like 9:25 and is there
I
anything
have a
else for
quick
the?
question for Posh, for Jim. Did the CPA firm, will they be starting their work fairly soon? Now that we have the agreement in place?
They're waiting for the agreement.
Okay.
The agreement is not in place.
Okay.
It's nearly in place.
Okay.
And that is
He said
based
it,
on information that we have. I think there was some
Well, I think,
paperwork that was supposed to go back. I mean, I think there's a general agreement between the two parties,
yes.
the city and CUNY.
I think all there were a small number of concerns that I mentioned in connection with the draft engagement letter, and they were all responded to, and I believe that'll be finalized and
Great. I like the.
and then they
I
can
mean,
start.
They can start in the afternoon.
Well,
You know,
they have,
As far as we're concerned.
they have the same information that we have available to us
Okay.
that I've shared with them. I mean, I'm not gonna take the scanned budget book now that we got the budget book, so I'll send them that. But I do believe that there needs to be some time where allocated at the finance committee meeting that, you know, they sort of say, okay, well, this is what the engagement looks like, this is what we recommend, this is where we may need some help from the city. You know, they're not here to produce an audit. They're here to advise on what's already available.
Will they be able to make the meeting on the 14th?
I don't know. I mean, they know that we have a meeting,
So
but
did you want
I
to put this on
wanted
the
to talk
agenda?
to, I wanted to talk to the chairperson to see if there was an opening or if it should be. But I mean, I think that work needs to be in parallel with what's going on with trying to get a budget,
Yeah.
a full year budget done.
I can put them on the agenda, probably at the beginning, right, so that, I mean, I need this report from Counselor Maddox first, because we're still working on the Racial Justice Task Force. You know, things that they recommended over a year ago, but that's only gonna be 10 minutes, and then I could put CUNY in there for the second piece of the agenda, and then the rest of the, however long it takes us to talk about the updates on the information we've requested. Does that work?
I think that worked great.
Yeah. And the meeting starts at 6, so.
All right, so
Mr. President? I requested a little bit of recognition just now. I think you saw.
No, I did not see.
Okay, well, thank you. So I have a question about the requirements of this council hiring a firm to analyze a budget that has been voted down. Is there a timeline in this contract for the services that will be rendered? Is
They
this a
said they'd get it
requirement
done by the end
that
of
they
the
will
month.
have an analysis
They're gonna do an analysis of the
will be
2024.
willing to vote on a fiscal year 2025 budget?
My understanding is they're reviewing the 2024 budget. Tell me, you know, why don't you explain the scope of work real quick?
Well, I think that's to be determined in our finance committee meeting where we're all present. I mean, I think that's,
Wait, the scope of work for this firm is to be determined in the finance committee?
I think
or
they're
there's a
working for
contract?
council, they're not working for me. I'm not gonna dictate what they have to do.
The contract does not include a scope of work?
It does include a scope of work, but it's a bulletized scope of work. It's a series of things that need to be done.
Can I ask the law director, if we sign a contract with a firm, the scope of work that's in the contract is what they will be held to, not some other?
It's the scope of work what's in the contract.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there's a scope of work in a contract that is almost ready for my signature, I suppose, do you know what the scope of work is?
I don't have it with me. I have it on my computer, but you're gonna have it in the.
Is an analysis
it's-
of the
it's-
2025 budget included in their scope of work?
It is.
And is there a deadline for that analysis?
No.
All right.
But verbally, I believe they said in the interview that they would be able to finish by the end of January
We're trying to get it done by the-
because they couldn't, I think they said they couldn't, they had some other stuff lined up for February. That's my recollection.
Taxes.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Well, so there is not a firm deadline in here, and I think one of the concerns that was given voice at some point was, you know, their ability to get information that they need to do their work and so on. So my guess is that they're reluctant to commit to a date certain. And the scope is actually very general. It's to assist the council by consulting over council's fiscal responsibilities, including budgeting and developing best practices for financial oversight.
Okay,
So it,
not specific to the 2025 budget.
yeah, I don't think that it references specifically the 25.
But this is a requirement, it appears, from this conversation of a majority of council to have an analysis from an outside firm about a fiscal year 2025 budget.
There's gonna be questions that we have that, I will give you an example. How much of a deficit can we, how much of it, if there's gonna be a deficit budget, how much can the city afford?
If there is going to be.
If there's gonna be a deficit in whatever budget we're gonna approve or we're gonna look at approving, what is the amount that we could safely afford?
Is this not something that you could just look at GFOA or?
No, this is something we would normally ask a finance officer that's a city staff member, but we don't have one.
Okay, well, I think this question has been asked and answered for years by finance directors about, and they generally tend to refer to GFOA
Or recommend.
They do.
recommendations,
They do.
which we can very easily refer to without spending. I mean, that's fine, council can spend its budget how it sees fit. And I, for one, don't actually have a problem with council receiving some additional help with this kind of thing. But I do have a concern about tying a question like that to the approval of a budget that does not propose dipping into reserves for 2025.
Well, then, if there's no, then that wouldn't be a question we'd ask them then.
Okay.
And Mary made a point that reminded me, I didn't want to overstep. When I say the agreement is essentially ready between the law department and our review and Chuny and Panici, that means, we're ready to sign approved as to legal form. Needs to be certified by the fiscal officer and it has to be signed by the mayor before it's not a contract. So I'm speaking only to my role, the law department's role in that.
All right, very good. All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. This meeting is adjourned at 9:32.